So first of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know we have people from all over, covering all of the continents, which is a truly amazing thing to see. And it's great to have you here with us for this third and actually the final Keystone session of Climate Savers Week. My name is Ian Kaplan, and I'm the founder of the Climate Savers that is initiated this week. And I couldn't have done it alone. It's been done truly with the amazing support of so many people who've helped me make this a reality. And before we jump right in by asking the panel members to briefly introduce themselves, I'd just like to tell you one more thing, which is that while we're having this session itself, don't worry about trying to network and figure out who are the other participants. You can come into the Climate Savers platform. You can create your profile, both a personal profile and an organizational profile, so you don't need to choose between them. And then you can find one another afterwards. So please feel free to enjoy the discussion, enjoy the insights that this amazing panel has to offer. And you can do the networking afterwards. It all stays up 24/7, 365. So in terms of the format for the session, I'm gonna ask each of our panelists to take 1 minute just to present themselves. It's much more interesting for them to present themselves rather than me tell you who they are. And then I'm going to ask a question, and each panelist will have the opportunity to respond to it. And we're gonna go around like that for the series of questions. If you have any questions, you, the audience, have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, like I mentioned before, and we will try to get to them. So I'm going to start off, and I'm gonna ask Marissa, would you please introduce yourself, followed by Michelle, Renuka, Alex, and then Ranja. So go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Ian. Good morning, everybody. Good morning over here in the USA. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I am the founder of Climate Social LLC, which I started 6 years ago. I work at the intersection of social media and sustainability. With a master's in environmental studies, I started working with a couple of publications focused on CSR, sustainable brands, and Triple Pundit, where I led their social media efforts for a few years and then decided to expand my reach. So now I work with a variety of clients across the for-profit and nonprofit sectors in a variety of industries, from forestry to energy policy to carbon technology to life cycle assessment and more, with amazing clients both here in the US and globally. And what I do is really social strategy, helping both the organizations and their thought leaders to express themselves, to grow their networks, to really grow their reach in really LinkedIn and Twitter primarily, with the addition of Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest, depending on the role that they are. And I work with some great colleagues who also enhance our services with PR and much more video, podcasting, SEO, websites, and et cetera, just really focused on the digital marketing space and how organizations can bring forth their messaging, how they're impacting the world through these digital channels. So I look forward to being here and look forward to this conversation today.
Thanks, Marissa. Michelle?
Hi, it's Michelle Carville. I'm in Berkshire in the UK, a little town called Maidenhead, and I am the author of Sustainable Marketing: How to Drive Profits with Purpose, the co-host of the Can Marketing Save the Planet podcast, and the co-creator of the Sustainable Marketer Manifesto, which is effectively a Hippocratic oath for marketers to be more responsible, to get educated and to become more responsible about the role marketing plays. And we are on a mission, aligning with partners to encourage the 10.6 million marketers on the planet to come together to really think about rethinking what marketing is, and therefore helping to support what business needs to look like too. So that's that. But similar to Marissa, I do have a digital background. I run a digital agency, and I have worked a lot in digital transformation. And so I too am kind of working in this intersection between digital technology and sustainability, because there is this inextricable link between the two when it comes to communicating, particularly now in a very digitally enabled world.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Renuka, if you could present yourself.
Hello, I am Dr. Renuka Thakur, and I'm a research officer at University College of Estate Management, Reading, Berkshire, so not so far from Michelle. I am also a founder of Global Sustainable Futures Progress Through Partnership Network. And basically, this network initiated due to three reasons. There is a big divide between academics and business and practices, I would say. And there's also big divide between global South and global North. And especially early career researchers have no platform to go anywhere and commute or engage with international forum and show their innovative ideas and share them. And so with these initiatives, and especially when COVID came up, I thought that online platform would give them an opportunity to engage freely. And so I initiated this, and within 10 months' time, I have been able to get 800 coordinators from 105 countries, which is amazing. But now we are looking to make an impact. My reason to be here are threefold. One is to show researchers how they can engage with public, how they can engage with businesses and speak common language, which is understood by everyone. Secondly, I have been done a small research. I have done pilot research, and it was on sustainable development goals. And I found, and specifically focusing on climate change, and I found in this local area like Lancashire, only 18% or less than 18% of people knew about this. They were novice in this section. And further, I'm looking to put a bid on EU base, like on a EU level and associate country level, which is bringing 20 countries together and to show how media can engage with SDGs and can accelerate this action within communities and businesses. So thank you very much, Ian, for inviting me, giving me so big opportunity to talk to people, and I'm looking forward to everyone and probably prospective my participants, like thousands of them here in future. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Close my video for now, and
no problem. Thank you very much.
For the engagement.
Thanks for that introduction. Alex, you're next.
Yeah, hello, my name is Alex Diaz. I am in San Juan, Puerto Rico in the Caribbean, and I have a 30-whatever-year run of experience in journalism. I was a reporter and editor for 15, 20 years or so, and the rest of the time I've been in agencies and marketing departments. Right now, I do two things. I have a consultancy called Common Future, and I work here where you see me today at an agency, a public relations agency in San Juan. So, and the focus is climate adaptation. So I started covering actually the first COP conference in '92. That's where I, fell in love with the climate change issues, and it's been a 30-year obsession since. Just trying, either writing about it, analyzing it, working on it in various dimensions. And for the last several years, my own focus has been on the adaptation side of the equation, with the idea that you have to do both. I mean, this is a parallel path challenge. You have to do whatever you can, or we all have to do whatever we can to mitigate. But now we also have to do everything we can to adapt. So to the climate changes are now irreversible and inevitable. Absolutely. So happy to be here.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Anja, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we're going to jump right into the questions, and we'll try to get to all of them so that you'll have an opportunity to present your views. You're muted.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ranga Sirilal. I'm joining you all from Colombo, Sri Lanka, far away from you all. It's 7 o'clock in Sri Lankan time. And I have been a journalist for more than 20 years, and I've been working with both local and international media. At the moment, I'm working as the acting editor for BBC Sinhala Service in Sri Lanka, and I'm happy to join you all.
Great, thank you very much, Ranga. Thank you for that round of introductions. We now all have a better idea of all of your backgrounds and different perspectives, which is nice because they're very complementary to one another. So let's jump right in with the first question, and it is this. There are those who would claim that marketing, advertising, and the media in general have, whether intentionally or otherwise, through the consistent messaging and ad campaigns, played a significant role in driving overconsumption and creating a throwaway society, all based on how can we make life as convenient as possible. Has messaging on climate been the problem over the last 20 years? And how have you seen it from your own experiences? So Marissa, your thoughts, and let's use that same order. Marissa, Michelle, Renuka, Alex, Ranga. Ranga, please try and keep your answers to about 2.5 minutes, so we have time for everyone. Go ahead.
Sure. It's a great question. I do think that, marketing has been a problem over the past decades of, really driving consumerism and capitalism as we know it, particularly in sort of, Western culture. It's how things are sold to the public, whether that's through TV, radio, newspaper, billboards, you name it, it's marketing and advertising. Yes, it's an issue. And at the same time, climate has just been blatantly ignored. I think we've all seen the reports and, coming out with the lack of coverage, whether that's in our local news, national news, or through marketing. It's just not been talked about. So most people don't have awareness of the real climate issues. Most people, generally speaking, are not even aware that COP26 is about to take place or what that really means for the world. There's just a lack of understanding. However, I see in more recent years, even in the past 5 years, even a great shift in that, and corporations are finally, stopping talking about the great work they're doing in philanthropy, but really focusing more on what they're doing for the environment, for climate action, and they're also getting called out for greenwashing. So, companies are definitely waking up and realizing that they need to come out with commitments. They need to be talking about either their progress on carbon or net zero or energy savings, and really putting numbers and stats with that, and not just saying that it's not just fluff, it's not just smoke, it's real time for action. And so those that are not acting upon that will get left behind. They'll get swallowed up by their competition. And I think we're about to see great shifts in the years ahead in this decade of action.
Great, interesting, thank you. Michelle,
Yep.
Same question.
Same question. So yes, marketing has played a part. Marketing has historically been all about, have more, buy more, get more easily, more readily accessible. And many say, we don't have a climate issue, we have a convenience issue. And of course, marketing drives that convenience. And I do think, as Marissa said there, a lot of it is about education and just being completely unaware. And of course, ignorance is bliss. So, many of us as consumers, we will just carry on. And of course, there is a growing increase that, there is this, we talk about the conscious rising of consumers, and they are becoming more conscious, but that doesn't mean they can necessarily do anything about it, because the brands and the organizations and the marketers aren't really designing means and ways for consumers to make changes, to understand things. So, it's very difficult for consumers to understand whether a product is truly environmentally friendly or whether or not it's being thrown a load of greenwash. And yes, there are regulations coming about it, but brands and marketers and businesses need to take so much more responsibility than they have been. And I can only talk for myself. When I was writing Sustainable Marketing, How to Drive Profits with Purpose, as a marketer, as a citizen, I always thought I was very, very conscious, very aware, very environmentally focused, very climate focused. And it was only when I actually did start digging around and doing the research that I started to think, oh my goodness, it's like a Pandora's box. You know, the more you open it, the more you see. And our view is that, you know, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. So if we can educate consumers, if we can help people to see it, then there will be more demand, more pressure from consumers pushing back because they're educated, and ideally the organizations also being educated to want to create real change and not just push a load of greenwash.
Thank you. And we're actually going to talk also about how consumers can have an impact on how the media and the marketers present the different kinds of messaging. Renuka, please, your thoughts?
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. And actually, I was going to tell that marketers have been always, or market is something like buy one, get one free. And they have never told, do you really want? If this message was out, that do you really want, then that would prompt customers to think and whether we really want. And that is not within the business reach, because they are looking from the economic point of view. They have economic framing. Traditionally, businesses have economic framing. Also marketers, also policymakers, they have been economic framing. And that has always attracted community also, because they have been taught and told and traditionally been treated like that. So we need to now, yes, we have been always also like now few changes have been done, and we have been looking at social framing, which is like whether we want to share with no, not share, but provide everywhere. But that also induces resources. If we are going to provide everyone everything at the same rate, then that is also going to impact adversely. And we also have now gone through some of that environmental framing, but still environmental framing is within just your own concept. It has not gone through the wide cycle or wider concept of biodiversity conservation and so on. And so I think we need to change the language of that marketers to reach the community, and that is most needed now. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly the answer is yes. You know, the messaging across media and marketing has not been consistent or sustained. But yeah, I would throw in a couple of things. I mean, first, you know, this sort of social change, like sustainability always takes, you know, decades. This is a decade-long, you know, challenge. And you know, we've seen it in so many profound, complex social changes of, you know, across history. So it, you know, it does take time, and that includes the media and marketing. So you know, folks in media and marketing are humans, just like everybody else, and so we respond to massive cultural trends just like everybody else. And so you know, these things take time. But the other side of this is that as reporters and journalists, we have been, and in fact continue to be, manipulated by very powerful interests, particularly fossil fuel. The fossil fuel industry has pumped a lot of money into just, you know, clouding the entire subject, right? And they've been doing it for 40 years. They've been very successful in their efforts. It's been all documented and reported. And they continue to do it. So you know, something that takes time and decades to change, when it's manipulated like that, then it's even, you know, it takes even longer for the media to get the message right, to report things right. So you know, it's complex. So it's not as easy to say, or just to blame the media and say, you know, the media has not been responsible, the media has not gotten the message right. Because we work, you know, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in context. It happens with influences, and we respond to that as well. So, so yes, but it's complicated.
Yeah, and it's interesting when actually the next question is going to deal with that is there enough time left to make an impact? Ranga, please, what are your thoughts coming from the perspective of someone who works with the more institutional media?
Yes, as Alex said, I think it plays a major role. We are on a consumeristic society, and everybody is looking at increasing their profits. So more marketing, more advertising is the way to get their profits. And when it comes to media, very limited resources, and they have the financial constraints. So they'll have to definitely rely on most of the advertisers and marketing materials. So that definitely has an impact on the entire society and how media is behaving, and it is being controlled. Whether you like it or not, advertising and marketing plays a major role in not only on climate issues, major issues. Any issue you talk, there is a real impact from the marketing and advertising.
Thank you very much. So from what you're all saying, it's clear that yes, the media has played a role. And I'd like to ask a two-part question for the next one, which is, should the media be more involved in the climate change discussion, or should they be taking a wait-and-see approach, a more business as usual in terms of how the media operates, and leave addressing the issues to the politicians, to the regulators, to civil society, and the other actors who are currently addressing it? And the second part that goes with that is, if the media should be involved, you all have experience in different verticals of the media, and you know how much time, and Alex, you spoke about this, you know how long it takes for a campaign to have effect, or for an advertisement in the printed press to have an effect. Is there still enough time, or is it too late for the media and marketing to contribute significantly to creating a concrete change? And let's go with the same order. Marissa, would you like to kick off first?
Sure. I think at this point it's all hands on deck we need to solve this crisis. And it's time for media to step up. And again, whether we're talking about, newspapers or TV news, that sort of media, how consumers are getting their information about the world. We see, I'll speak for myself here in the US, the same stories going over and over about who gets murdered or what companies are, shooting off a new product launch. But we don't really see the most important facts are how many people are not just dying because of guns, but are dying globally because already the air pollution and the pollution in the water that we have that are affecting our bodies and going to affect our bodies for future generations. This time right now is critical, that we need the media to really play a role. Companies are going to continue to do business as usual, but hopefully improve more drastically with more focus in the immediate future. And the politicians, I think, again, it just depends what politicians we're talking about and how they're able to affect change. But yes, the media will certainly have a role to play, and businesses should also follow suit. We just are in a time of awakening, and I think none of us really know what's to come, but we do know that the climate science from the recent IPCC reports is telling us that the time is now and present, and the circular effects from the glaciers melting and the seas getting warmer are happening at a more drastic rate than even were predicted decades ago. So there's no time to lose. Media needs to get on board.
And you do feel that media has the tools to be able to increase the pace of the impact that they have?
The tools, yes. I think it's more of a political will right now. It's more of a conservative versus Republican. Again, I'm speaking from America. The TV stations don't want to upset their viewers. They don't want to upset the businesses and rock people's boats. They want people to continue with their happy lives and, not get upset when they watch the news at night. But it's time to make sure. And there are campaigns. There are actually meteorologists here who have started campaigns, and certain news channels are actually getting on board to say, yes, we will talk about climate and not just talk about the daily weather, but we will talk about climate. So we do see some of that happening, which I think is good, and we need to see more and more of that happening too.
Great, thank you for that clarification. So Michelle, same two-part question to you, please.
Yeah, well, I feel I'm just echoing what Marissa said really about the urgency. It's kind of not optional now. Everybody needs to be really working together, and not only just focusing on the doom and gloom of the climate, the opportunity. It's often, it can become overwhelming. It can become negative. The news, particularly the mainstream news, if we're positioning the media that way, can be very down on the opportunities. But actually, there's a lot of positive things that we can achieve if we all come together very quickly. And I think, look how the media mobilized globally around COVID-19. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it was an example of having to react very quickly to educate their audiences, to drive behavioral change, to get people to do things differently, wear masks, stay indoors, stop working, from the places, stop traveling. It was extreme, and yet it happened. And it happened because there was a very real crisis. And I think, this goes back to changing behaviors, as Alex was just saying about, it takes time, we're all stuck in our ways, we're all shackled, this time's going to take years and years and years, and it's like we don't have that time, and that's the difference, that this is where media, marketing, messaging, communication, the education, we need to be not just selling the doom and gloom, but be mobilizing behavioral change by showing people what is really going on. And not enough of that is exposed. And there's a very sugar-coated positioning to what is going on. And unless we're kind of speaking to an echo chamber here, because we're all emotionally and, involved with this subject. We have a vested interest, we care, and so do many other people. But we, they're not digging around, they're not doing research, they're not writing books, they're not putting communities together. And so to try and affect this change, they're just going about their day-to-day lives. And so that's why marketing and the media are that interface between getting that message through. And we need to get that message through. And we need to get that message through continuously and quickly. We can't do it in a doom and gloom way, so people fall off the sides just thinking this is all too much and become too overwhelmed and depressed that they don't want to do anything. And that's what takes real leadership, this courage to step up by the media, by organizational leaders, to kind of position this as, the vision of what could be if we all pull together and move this forwards. We know the horror stories. Maybe we still need to hear about the horror stories of what's coming, but we also need to have that balance of the hope, the vision, the opportunities as we move forward. And I think the media can do that in an authentic way without greenwashing, by just, loading up the facts and presenting some opportunities.
Great. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Exactly. I echo both positions, like Marissa and Michelle have spoken most points here. But I would like to give something more here, add something more here, is like media is just representing other groups. That is, they are talking the same language, such as politicians, businesses, and others. They are not going independently. They are not researching on themselves, whether what they have spoken, or you can say reference to context. Sometimes they pick up the things out of blue or without any context and put in front to the public, where it misguides the public. So they should be looking into deepen their own research into these things and bring up the facts, where these facts come from, why these policies are needed. It is also somewhat the mistake of intellectual people who do not directly communicate with media and present their clear points that this needs to be transferred to the community. This should be like listening to the community. And so I think there needs to be a clear, structured way, and that responsibility lies to elects. These elects who are doing the policies and businesses, and who are knowise of this, but they should be they are known to these all issues. And so I think the media should play the role of bringing these voices to them, but also put the facts and the reasons, and also they should blend into the cultural and local language in the sense the dialogues and discourse going on, and they should be blending those messages in there to reach the community. And that is what media is lacking here, I think.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and we'll be talking about the community level interaction as well. Alex, please, your thoughts?
Yeah, let me, if I may, let's go. I mean, if I can take you all into a newsroom, right, and how this actually works in real life. I mean, the couple of things here. I mean, first, editors and reporters and producers. Again, we're people too, right? And so, just like all of the human race, we tend to be reactive, not proactive about issues and about things. And so, when something happens like COVID, we react, and we react quickly and well. When we have a perception that there's a debate out there, that there's not a sufficient consensus, like there was with COVID, to drive a story, then we fall back on the principle of balance and impartiality, which is a very core principle of every serious newsroom in the world, right? So you want to be impartial, you want to be balanced, you want to cover all sides and give airtime to all views. So as long as we perceive or we understand that there are conflicting views on a subject like climate change, we're going to be out there covering all sides and not taking sides, right? There are advocacy publications and media out there that do take sides, and that's fine. It's part of the business. But most significant or established or mainstream news organizations, they really generally try to do a good, responsible job of being a balanced, impartial reporter and observer of the story and of news, and that includes this one. And so, one of the reasons where why we see the media not doing what you're all suggesting that they do, what all of us suggest that they do, is pretty much that, right? And so, and again, it goes back to how long this takes to reach a point of consensus, of critical mass, clarity of the evidence, so that the news media sides with what we can call truth, right? So in this audience here, we understand what the truth is. In most media organizations, the truth is still muddled. The truth is still uncertain. And so as long as that uncertainty remains, and again, manipulated by the fossil fuel industry, pumping a lot of money into making sure that we see this as a debate, or that we see this as still uncertain, then that'll explain the news coverage that we are right to criticize, because we understand a different interpretation of the truth than most of the mainstream media does. But they are being responsible. They are doing their job, as they see it. And it's a matter of how of perspective, right? And putting ourselves in the shoes of a newsroom journalist and editor.
Great, thank you, Alex. Ranga, please.
Yeah, as Alex explained how a media newsroom operates, yes, there is no consensus about the issue is one issue. And also, if you look at most of the media are event driven, they will be covering one flood incident to another drought. So they will be covering events and not the reason for most of the reason behind those events. There's a reason for that also, because most of these media institutions, they lack resources. They don't have the financial capacity, unless like, yes, uh, the National Geographic channel or the specific channels, they would deploy 5 people for 3 years to do a story. But most of news media, they will have only one reporter to cover about 5 stories a day. So with those things, with those limitations, media are finding it difficult. Apart from, there is no consensus whether you'll have to have the correct information and data to cover that, and you don't have resources to really cover the incident. That is, I think, what we have been seeing. And about the timeline, yes, you can't say we can wait for another 10 years or 20 years, because we have been waiting for long, and we are being given deadlines to fulfill this, fulfill that, carbon neutral by this year. But giving deadlines or giving time is not the answer for this, because we are sitting on a crisis. And it is not, my personal belief is that it is not whether it's a journalist responsibility, or we should allow the policymakers to take the decisions. No, it has to be inclusive. Not only journalists or policymakers, even the people, the society has to get involved in it. There itself, the media has a main role to educate the people, not just the flooding, why flooding is happening, or not just the raining, or not just a drought, not just a food shortage, why these things are happening, not just a wildlife issue, what is the reason behind it. I think for that, we need the media.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So it's a matter of resources and also a certain need for the media to do more of the background providing of information to increase awareness as well. So a number of issues or a number of topics have come up in this discussion. We've talked about community involvement in the connection. We've also talked about, in essence, biases. And I'd like to actually start with that one. That I think is pretty well established that one of the main reasons the world has failed to take sufficient climate action is you're talking about a mix of human biases that get in the way, whether it's political interests, financial interests, or maybe even personal interests. Mitigation proponents, for example, would claim that a turn to adaptation would divert the vital all hands on deck focus on mitigation, whereas adaptation proponents counter that we can and must do both. And since inevitable and escalating climate impacts are already upon us, so we must already begin protecting ourselves. So how can the media and marketing be used to counter and actually overcome that human instinct and create a bridge or a balance between different imperatives? How can the media, bring these different perspectives or tackle them in such a way that it creates a bridge between extremes? Same order, Marissa, please.
Yeah, it's about telling stories. It's about showing people through video, through interviews that, this is not just about them, but making people see eye to eye with those all around the world that are experiencing these, different but similar effects due to climate change. If you're in an area that's not seeing wildfires, maybe you're seeing floods, but we're all unfortunately going to be impacted in one way or another by climate change. If we haven't yet, we're going to see it somewhere in our own two eyes. And so, having a way to share either what we've been through or what we're working on to counter those effects from climate change in our local lives, I think can really affect change. And we're seeing a lot of activism from different, particularly youth networks. I look a lot at social media, and I'm seeing all the time stories through video and people sharing photos and things that they're seeing in their own lives, I think that's really going to be the best way to affect change. And, you're talking about, conflict in points of views, whether it's, pro mitigation or pro adaptation, kind of, again, I think it's all hands on deck. And there's a role that all of us can play one way or another. So, the few of us that are speaking right now are really in the media, others are decision makers, others, might just be able to be convinced and then tell their family members that, hey, did you know that climate change is really an issue? And, this is how it's affecting us. And this is how we can, call up our local elected officials, or this is how we can reach out and call a company and tell them how we think they can do better. There are, different ways that we can all, in our own small ways, with our own two hands, really create some change. So, it's not this war on climate change is not going to be defeated by the politicians or by businesses. Media is here to tell the story of what's happening in politics and in business. And, but also I think the media has a great digital media, social media has a great opportunity to connect people that we've never seen before, 10 years ago even, or in 20 years ago, social media was not a thing, so here we are today. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have been having a Zoom call right now with several people from all around the world being able to connect in this way. So, I think this shows, even just us sitting here on this Zoom call shows the power of innovation. And, I think we just all have to stay optimistic and band together because we're all humans in this fight against climate change together. So let's continue to use the tools that we have at hand through media, storytelling, social media, and connection, and, propel the solutions that we need.
Thank you. Melissa, Michelle, please.
Yep. Yes, again, I would bring it back to, I think there are two aspects that, as humans, it often takes crisis, doesn't it, to affect change. It kind of goes back to Darwinism. That's from that friction, from that crisis, that's when we are propelled to change. And that's exactly what happened with COVID. You have a crisis situation, we respond. We're not, certain parts of the world are feeling the crisis, but there's still, as Alex was saying and Randa was saying, there's still this kind of conversation about, is it not? Do we have 10 years? Is that for real? And so I think there is this aspect that individuals left to their own devices probably were pretty lazy. We probably won't do that much. And so that's where education comes in. Education so that people can be empowered to do something about it, so that they individually, I did some work with the Carbon Literacy Trust here in the UK with one of the universities here in the UK with Nottingham Business School. And what was really interesting is that once people are made aware individually of the role that they can play, just simple things like changing light bulbs and understanding the implications that if they're boiling a kettle in the UK, there are implications for a family in Bangladesh when it comes to energy and resource. Connecting those interdependencies that we've kind of lost. And Marissa's right, social and digital technologies allow for that connectivity. But of course, there's got to be the will to want to see that activity and be part of that. And that comes from the individual to not feel this is enforced, but to feel that they are actually empowered. So I think it's about empowering individuals to better understand that they're a really powerful force in and as of themselves. They themselves can start to make some incredible shifts. So all of us, each and every single one of us has that opportunity. So I would say it's education, empowerment. But, echoing really, there's not really much more to add from what Marissa was saying from my end.
Okay. Renuka?
Yeah, thank you. I would again go back to my different framing perspective. Like different imperatives come from different framing and different values that you have constructed while living and experiencing the world, and sometimes it happens that a group is having economic framing. So you have to explain them the economic saving through this climate change. Otherwise, you can also use social impact framing, where some of them are obsessed with this. You can use environmental framing, you can use cultural framing, you can use indigenous framing, you can use technologies who are obsessed by technology, you can use that framing. And so I think we need to look communication of climate change as a business policy, as a business strategy, induce into it differentiation strategy, and make it strategically applied to that group, to that community. And those all things which you have already done in marketing your products and services, you need to apply them here in climate change. And if such applications are made, if the language is made more lucrative and attractive to various groups, then I think the message would be you will be able to convey this message to people. There should be an interest, motivation for each one to get involved. And that is that is the responsibility of this media. And they should act in that way. Thank you.
Alex.
Yeah, then the question asks about human biases, and if there's one contribution that that brain science and behavior science has made, and to this debate over the last 5-10 years, it's voluminous research showing the specific human biases that get in the way of effective action in the face of a challenge like this. And it really largely explains why, since this began 40, 50 years ago, there's the call, the warnings about global warming and climate change. We have moved so little. I mean, we can talk about the manipulation of the fossil fuel industry, we can talk about all that, but there's also ingrained in our brains as a species several really hardwired biases that impede effective action. And so, for example, one is complexity bias, right? So we tend to shy away from a future that looks difficult because it's really complex and it takes a lot of time to understand, and we'd rather fall to then what is called the status quo bias, which is our comfort zone, right? So we tend to stay in what's comfortable and what we know, and not really break out of that and try to understand what's coming next, especially if it's complex. There's optimism bias, which we're, getting a bit of here in this conversation. I mean, we're getting all kinds of reports, the latest IPCC report. The science is just overwhelming, telling us that it's pretty much going to be pretty impossible to solve the climate crisis at this stage, even if we do everything that we want to do here in this call and in that COP26 conference. There are all kinds of tipping points that are already tipping. All kinds of there's all kinds of evidence that shows that the climate crisis is probably not going to be solved, regardless of our best efforts, right? And so, and yet we fall back on this optimism bias, this idea that it's all going to be okay, that it's not going to happen to us, that somehow we're going to solve this, we're going to get out of this. In the face of a ton of science that comes out every year. Telling us otherwise, telling us a really, worse story than we want to believe, because we have this optimism bias wired in our brains, right? And so there's confirmation bias, right, which is kind of like the flip side to the optimism bias. All kinds of biases that are in the way. And so the question is, what can media and marketing do about this? Well, the problem is that journalists and marketing people also suffer from the same biases, right? So I mentioned the newsroom earlier, and the marketing departments and agencies and all kinds, the people in charge of changing the story and getting the word out also suffer from the same optimism bias, confirmation bias, status quo bias, and so forth. And it's really, again, and the brain science, behavior science, and the research and the peer-reviewed studies are just, by now, the last 5-10 years have been incredible what they're telling us, and it's pointing to this picture, meaning we're not going to react on time. We are likely, going to cling to our optimism and to our biases and to our comfort zones, and then we're going to react when the bad stuff really happens, like COVID. I mean, multiplied at times, many climate crises coming up in the next several years, and we're just going to be reactive about all of that. We're not going to be we're going to react on time. And when I say we, I don't mean people in this call, because again, we're on the same page here, but most people around the world. I mean, it's almost 8 billion people now, and I don't know how many thousands of media outlets and companies and NGOs, and it's just the nature of our brains that's really standing in the way of faster progress, of the kind of progress we would all love to have in this call, for sure.
Thanks for that. Yeah, a little bit of a reality check, as you say. Ranga, please, your thoughts? Ranga, I think you might be muted.
I think he froze.
Yeah, I think he.
The receiving end.
Okay, there you go.
The issue is like the biggest polluters or the people in those countries, they don't feel it. They don't get the real impact of these issues. Recently, yes, we have seen floods in London, but nobody thought, why the floods in London? To bridge the gap, I think we have to change the mindset of people. Unless
it seems that we have, yeah, he has fallen off the line, so we'll wait for him to come back. In the meantime, let's continue. Let's continue. So we've talked about community, and I know that we don't have a whole lot of time left, but there are a couple of questions that I think are going to be very interesting. One of them is, how do we get, what would be the involvement of media and marketing at the community level?
Can you hear me?
A number of you hinted at that before. Yeah. So regarding community level, how can we make communities and customers aware of the realities of climate change at the community level, not just at in the global press, at the global level? Marissa.
Okay. So question for me, I guess community level can mean a couple things. I think of community as local, my neighborhood, my town, my state even, but also there's, different definitions of community. So you're talking about maybe your religious group, your affiliation that, maybe you hang out with, or a different community group, or a different way that you gather with folks in person or virtually really close to you. Or also communities digitally. We have thousands and thousands of LinkedIn groups, for example, where people are coming together to talk about a particular topic. That's a form of community. So, there's different ways that we can all use communications to both educate and raise awareness and talk about ways that we can come together for those solutions. And if we're talking back to marketing, of course, it's really to those companies to work with their community managers in those digital spaces to talk about what they're doing, how they're becoming more sustainable in their operations through their products, how they're working with their local communities, how companies are taking care of their employees and those that are along their supply chains that are also vital to the products that they're creating. So that was a kind of wide open question, Ian, about community. But, I think that there's a million ways to answer that, really. But, for me, the work that I do as a social media expert working with companies in sustainable business, it's all about really putting forward the work that they're doing, you know, how they are working with their clients to help them to develop those sustainability strategies, to develop the technologies that we need. And there are, you know, while we're talking a lot of doom and gloom and urgency, yes, there are a lot of companies out there that are seriously fighting in their spaces on climate change right now through carbon technologies, through EV technologies. I see a box in the chat about electrification. Yes, you know, when it comes to the built environment and every part of kind of the modern world that we touch, there are opportunities to electrify and become more carbon neutral and zero energy. So, you know, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but let's all continue. Us here each have a role to work with our own communities, again, whether that's digital or virtual or, you know, in real life, and to push for advocacy for those companies and groups in which we're involved in.
Okay, thank you.
That answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Obviously, community can be approached at different levels, but you know, on one hand, you have the kind of press like CNN and Fox, and then you have very much more local outlets, and it's just to make a differentiation between them. I know that we're beginning to run out of time, so what I would like to propose is the following. There are two more questions, and I'd actually like to present the two questions and then give each speaker the opportunity to choose which one they want to address. And I think they're going to be really interesting because these are issues that are coming up. We're seeing them a lot. So the first question is this. We've talked about how and whether the media can or should influence popular perception about climate change. So the question then is, and let's turn it around, what can the public do to get the media to change their approach? I think, Alex, you referred to this earlier, you know, what it's like in a press room, creating consensus, so on and so forth. So question number one is, how can the public actually affect what kind of marketing they receive, what kind of media coverage it takes place? That's question number one. And question number two has to deal with greenwashing. And many organizations are afraid to publicly talk about the steps that they are taking to drive a more sustainable climate-saving agenda for fear of pushback or claims of you're just greenwashing it. What would you advise them to do to overcome their fear of negative media coverage? So I'm going to ask each of you to choose. Do you want to talk about how organizations can overcome the fear of negative media coverage? Or would you like to address how the public can influence the kind of messaging that the media provides?
Can I go with that one?
Yeah, Michelle, please.
So how do the public put pressure on the media to, or the marketers to respond, or the brands to respond? Is that what you're saying?
To an extent, yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose that comes down to being a responsible consumer, and I mean, I can, from a brand marketing perspective, if, for example, a brand is making claims, and it kind of steps into a little bit of the greenwashing, but if a brand is making claims about their product or packaging being 100% recyclable, then as a consumer, rather than just accept that, okay, that's fine, that must be the way because they've said it, to actually be a little bit more informed and to go back and ask questions and start posing just questions. Is that right? How does that work? How can you validate that? How is this 100% recyclable? Can you tell me more? So once, as a consumer, we start pushing back and being a little bit more empowered and informed because we're educated, we will naturally start asking more questions. I mean, I'm an absolute nightmare of a consumer now. Any brand would definitely not want to get me on their social media because I'm saying, can you validate that? Where's the proof? You know, don't send me to a website where I know that, you know, the competitions and authority and markets authority over here has just brought in the green code for exactly that reason, because 40% of the claims made by brands and organizations aren't true, and in some ways are unlawful. They're breaking consumer laws. So consumers, once educated a little bit, can just start to ask questions. And I think it's as simple as that. Start asking questions. Start asking questions of the media. Start asking questions of the stuff that you're being presented with. If it doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. You know, don't believe everything that is fed to you. Be empowered as an individual to take ownership for the planet that you are a citizen of, and have a responsibility for. So I think it starts with education, understanding that we can all do our bit, and then pushing back to these organizations and institutions, because as Alex said, you know, they're people, they're just people. They've got the same biases, they've got the same skills, they've got the same influences. We have to push back as citizens. We're way more powerful if we push back to say, can you validate that? Can you do this? Can you do that? And if you can do that at a community level, you know, because there's a group of you now going back to push back, that makes it even more powerful. So start asking difficult questions. Start asking people to validate what they're saying. Is it true? Is it true? That's it. Is it true? Are they doing what they say they're doing? Very, very simple questions.
Interesting. So demanding of the media more rigorous reporting standards. Renuka, please, your thoughts?
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing, that do not listen to any myths. Do not give encourage to fake news. You must be realizing what's the fact. You must be researching on the facts and troll them if it is not a genuine story. You have to troll them. You should not encourage them. And do not be afraid. Reinforce your message with facts and evidence. You should be overcoming this fear and getting engaged with positively with the media. That's all I want to add here.
Okay, thank you very much. Alex, which of the two questions would you like to address?
Yeah, well, if I can tackle both very quickly, I would say that the first one, I mean, if I can differ a little bit with my colleagues here, individuals are not going to get it done. I mean, obviously, it's too dispersed. It's just a law of dispersion, right? I mean, if you have too many people and only a few do something, then you don't have the needed pressure. So it will take, you know, the same model that the fossil fuel industry has used. In other words, you know, big money, certain organizations covering the entire media landscape. That has to be done on the climate side, and it hasn't happened yet. So you got to have, you know, from the public. I mean, the question is, how can the public influence the media? Well, it has to happen institutionally, organizationally. You got to have some very rich people funding a very select group of organizations that just flood the entire media landscape with the right story and the right balance and the right science, and that would get it done. On the companies, you know, not greenwashing. I mean, that's just the nature of capitalism. It's really, really hard to get, you know, unless we do it the same way, right? Unless that same strategy of a few people with a lot of money funding some organizations to do the same thing with companies, which hasn't happened either, then you're really not gonna, because again, it's a lot of companies, you know, are doing the same thing. It comes from the same kind of mindset, the same kind of thinking, and that's just gonna continue to happen until we have, you know, this effective pressure, this effective organized citizen-based pressure, again, funded by certain people with certain organizations, you know, covering the entire planet with the right info. I mean, if we just leave it to individuals and to highly dispersed actors, you know, we're going to see the same results we've seen for the last 50 years, and it's just not going to happen anywhere near on time.
Okay. Ranga, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my connection is very poor, might drop again. But yes, what I'm saying is, like, it is difficult to fight with those wealthy business people who are pumping billions of dollars into these industries. But again, luckily, today world, as Marisa said, that we are equipped with the social media. So there is a big role where the individuals can play through the social media. So that will force the traditional media also to think twice how they report and what they report. And also there is a good opportunity of fact checking and question what traditional media is doing. So in that way, the general public also can get involved in this, and they can force the traditional media to cover what they want.
Okay, thank you. So we've actually come to the end of the questions. I'm looking here at the chats and I see that a lot of you have been very active. Would any of the panel members, if there are any specific questions that are of interest that they'd like to address, please feel free.
I'd just like to highlight, I think the last one, or now the next to last one, the Margaret Mead quote that Michelle Carville. Oh, yeah, there you go. I didn't realize your last name was Carville. Yes, absolutely. I mean, total agreement, and it goes to the point that, you know, but if those people, if those very few people are in certain organizations and they are funded by, again, a very few people of like mind and like soul, then that Mead vision can actually go a long way toward influencing the entire media and marketing and corporate landscape around the world. So I think Margaret Mead was talking about just social movements, and having every social movement starts with one visionary, one person, and it kind of spreads, right? And that's, you know, that's one way to do it. But again, in this case, we're dealing with such a massive subject. Again, when you look at the tipping point science and climate science and where we're at right now and what it takes to shift the world, and when you look at human biases and how the brain works and how reactive we are, you know, the Margaret Mead kind of, you know, small group of grassroots folks is just not going to get it done. We need that small group to be really heavily funded by another small group and have a really effective strategy to reach the rest of the planet, and then it happens.
Thank you. There are a couple chats here that I'd actually like to that are synergistic with one another. One, Elliot, you ask, how do you know what information out there is true or not? And that comes to the question of what role the public can have on determining, you know, on influencing the media, and not necessarily vice versa. And then that goes together, I think, with something that Brian McLaughlin wrote, which is how can the public wrestle control away from the media owners? How can you demand truth when you're not paying media salaries? How can that be reconciled? It's a business on one hand. Alex, you've made that clear. Rang, I think you've spoken to that as well. But at the same time, the Margaret Mead quote, don't appreciate the positive, you know, the potential influence. Then Alex, you've also said, but you also need a lot of money to be thrown at these established groups to start making change. How does that get resolved?
I would just add, I mean, I take Alex's point, and he's right, but, you know, these groups, for example, Clean Creatives, who, you know, you may be aware of, they're based in the US. They have taken on, they've created an F list, and it's of all the agencies, all the media agencies, all the ad agencies that are working in the fossil fuel industry. And they've called them out. They've put a list of these agencies and said, these are the agencies. This is where they are. This is the work they're doing. This is how much money they're getting from the fossil fuels to greenwash, to you know, we call it greenwash. It's lying. You know, I don't even know why we just call it lying. We've even created a word for greenwash. It's just lying. And you know, they are a small group of individuals, but they're a bloody powerful group of individuals now, and they're gathering momentum. And that momentum is now all over the press. You know, they've been all over the press in the UK. They've been on the Sky News, this news. So it has to start. And I take your point, Alex, it's not going to be individuals, but it's going to be, if we bring all of those groups together and they all gather their own momentum, and we all start, you know, sustainability and climate, saving the climate, it isn't something we're going to do on our own. It isn't something we can be competitive about. It's something that it's in our interests to collaborate, and it doesn't really matter who's doing what, as long as we're all doing something and moving in the right direction. all of a sudden those little small groups become very, very, very collected and very, very united and very powerful, regardless of how they're funded. But I take your point. Yes, I know we're battling some huge, ridiculous investments, and there is a lot of politics aligned with it. But there are so many now, hundreds of thousands of tiny organizations that have had enough, and they're starting to connect, and digital technologies is allowing them to connect.
Great, thank you. So at this point, I'm actually gonna start to wrap up, and I'd like to thank everyone who's participated in this and all of the other events during ClimateSavers Week. Many of the sessions have been recorded, including this one. I saw that someone asked in the chat earlier. Yes, this is being recorded. So if you go to the individual event profiles on the ClimateSavers platform, you will be able to see the links to the recorded versions or to the recorded sessions. And then, like I mentioned, please also go in, create your profiles. There are also discussion boards to continue the discussion. And of course, you can connect with one another. So thank you.